Calling the commission meeting to order. First of all, are there any general announcements?
I have one.
Okay.
I am the commissioner for the 5th District, and in our district is Sebastopol, the Sebastopol branch, and Ann Stroberger, who has been a long-time library employee, is retiring. So I just wanted to read a little bit to honor her. So Ann Stroberger has retired after 46 years of selfless commitment and service to the Sonoma County Library, most of it spent at the Sebastopol branch. Ann believes that libraries play an important role in giving everyone a chance to succeed in life through access to books and other resources. Ann's service to the people and visitors of Sonoma County has illustrated her commitment to the enduring value of libraries. As we honor Ann and the work of librarians and libraries, here are some interesting facts to consider. Americans spend an average of $35.81 per year supporting libraries, which is about 3 times less than what they spend on purchasing candy. Millions of people used libraries last year, and half of those said they did so to seek assistance from a librarian. Reference librarians answer approximately 6.6 million questions each week. In a 12-month period, public libraries offered 3.75 million programs and circulated 2.46 million materials to the public. Ann Stroberger worked to connect people with ideas, develop community bonds, and strengthen Sebastopol's unique community identity. Ann's daily presence is sorely missed in Sebastopol, but her spirit of extraordinary service continues, and we are all very grateful for that and wish her a lovely and well-deserved retirement.
Thank you.
I just have one thing I would like to say, and it's not an announcement, but I think on behalf of the Commission, I would like to thank Jamie and the entire negotiating team for successfully negotiating this labor contract that we labored over for, was it 5 or 6 years we've been doing this now? But anyway, you've gotten the labor contract for us for the next 3 years, and all of you folks on the negotiating team, thank you very, very much. We appreciate it.
Amen. Any other commission announcements? All right. Now is the time for public appearances for items that are not on the agenda. Are there any public appearances? Yes.
Hi. Members of the Commission, I'm Jonathan Greenberg, a parent of 2 library-using children in Sebastopol and the founder of Progressive Sebastopol, and the petition for the campaign to restore library hours in Sonoma County. I just want to today say that I support a ballot initiative, and I support this commission in allocating some level of funding, if you can, to get a pollster or a consultant to figure out what is the best way to raise money. We're sort of confused in the community as we want to support adequate funding for the libraries as to whether to go with a sales tax or a parcel tax. That's a question we'd really like to find out. And we're also confused about what entity should facilitate or host this ballot initiative. We would like, the city of Sebastopol spoke of supporting this initiative with a hope that it happen as soon as, in the June election. I know that's very ambitious, but we would love to see that happen. And so I would love to support this commission in trying to act as quickly as possible to lay the groundwork for that to happen. And what's needed is some advice and insight. My recommendation would be that, unlike a lot of reports and studies, that people are going to want to take your money, pollsters and consultants. And I know a poll only really takes 2 or 3 days to do. They do a sort of lightning poll, put a lot of resources on it. So I would love to see it happen soon, within weeks, not months, and that they report back to you as a condition in the RFP, that they report back to you this time next month to say what they would recommend, and that simultaneous to that, the library itself, the library director, come up with some sense of how much money, ballpark, the ballot initiative would need and what it would be spent for. If this is to start, it will really need to be started in December or January or so. And so time is really of the essence here, and I know that's a fast schedule. I think it would be a wonderful, legacy for this commission to have to get started, the ball rolling on a ballot initiative that could adequately fund the libraries and restore hours. Actually, and my other suggestion is that we look to actually improve hours, to restore more than just what we have, but perhaps Sunday hours, if that's the community supports that, evening hours, etc. And my last suggestion, for this is also that the commission, and I know this is a big ask, support Clause 10B 2, which allows local augmentation, the cities to fund libraries in the interim until we have adequate funding. It's become a very, very controversial issue. I think the cities should have the ability to do it. Sebastopol originally asked for it, and now they're they're questioning whether we should ask for it. And I know from Don Schwartz that some cities are objecting to this clause and would like it removed. It's only an option. It's not an obligation. Speaking as a Sebastopolian, we had surplus of $1 million last year in our city. 110 or 120,000 would restore funding. Every person I spoke to, I polled 50 people, they would love to see the city help, at least in this interim way. So I'd love to see the commission support that clause too. I don't know if it's politics. The last thing I'll say is that you may be the library commission longer than you think. The JPA may not be passed, and so it may really fall to you to carry this forward. And if so, I really wish you luck and would love to support a ballot initiative in whatever way I can to adequately fund the libraries. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from commissioners around that? That's partly on our agenda. We're on the same page in a lot of ways. It's on the agenda in the report on hours, and I believe the commission has already come out against the clause that you're suggesting we support at the last meeting, if I remember correctly. All right. Now on to Library Advisory Board time. Is there another comment? Yes, I'm sorry. Do we have our timer?
That would be me.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm just kind of here to support Jonathan's motions. And I'm Frank Baumgartner. I'm from Santa Rosa. And I just wanted to mention also that the key point that I'm sure you all more than aware of, that libraries are the foundation of our democracy. We can't even begin to learn to read without libraries and librarians. And the statistic you just gave was clear on, the number of times. I'm a historian, and I don't know, I can't even count the number of times I've come in here to ask the reference librarian a question, either to request a book or a source or something that they know they can do. You can get it on interlibrary loan, but you can do a lot of things online that you don't have to go to libraries for, of course. But still, I'm concerned because of the drop in hours, and I'm just speaking for families, but especially single parent families. I mean, because with the responsibilities they face in the summer, particularly, where else do you go with the library? You take your kid, and you see them out here, kind of waiting for the library to open. And so that's why it's critically important to, I think, to get some funding. And whether that takes us a ballot measure, or whether you have to twist the tail of the politicians, or what you have to do, I don't know, but I really am in support of it. And if we need a consultant to give us an idea of how to draft this measure, it's probably money well spent. So anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. There's something I was thinking about, but I let it go. Any other public comment? Okay, now we're moving on to item 4 on the agenda. And that is the Library Advisory Board time. Are there any members or representatives from a Library Advisory Board who has an issue they would like to bring forth? Seeing none, we'll move on to special discussion items number 5. Commission committee reports. The first is the Joint Powers Agreement Committee report. Did Julia have anything to say? Is that where her comment comes from?
No, she sent me some topics, comments on other topics on the agenda,
But not that.
but not the JPA.
Julia is our representative, and she will be coming to the meeting later, yes?
Well, I think we could, I'm on that committee too, and do you want to put this discussion off till Julia comes to the meeting?
We
or-
could.
That might be a good idea. When do you think she?
Okay. She's coming later.
Okay.
Okay. Moving on to the Revenue Committee. I think the Revenue Committee is beginning to get some direction.
Well, Susan Gustafson and Mary Evelyn Arnold and I are on the Revenue Committee, and we have not met for some months because there was a lot of dust that needed to settle. So now that we have an interim CFO on board, I think that we will start our meetings again, which we had been doing in the past, to meet with the CFO and have our questions about the budget answered and the future projections and things like that. So we'll be setting up a meeting with Bruce very soon. And one of the things later on in the agenda that's been suggested the Revenue Committee take a look at is the proposal to raise funds, whether it's through a parcel tax or some other sort of tax. So while we can't do that yet, because the JPA does not allow for us to do that, it's only if the new JPA is approved. It is certainly a good thing to start early to try to get a handle on, what exactly we can do towards that. So that will be a topic for future discussion. We'll be seeking input probably from County Council on what we can do, what monies we would be able to use to research that sort of thing. And I know it's premature because currently the Commission does not have the authority to do that. Hopefully, the JPA in its draft will be approved, giving the Commission that authority. So that's something that we want to be on top of.
My understanding, and people can maybe clarify it for me if I'm incorrect. I've been that way before. And that is that it's possible for us, as the current commission, to initiate a possible bond or tax election with the approval of the Board of Supervisors, or under the auspices of the Board of Supervisors. So it is possible that even if the JPA does not get changed, that we could begin to put those ducks in whatever row they need to be.
Right. I believe it only allows us to do a bond issue and not do a parcel tax or sales
Really?
tax. Yes.
We need
Yes,
to
we
check
looked
that.
at this a couple of years ago when Rod Dole came and spoke with us.
And my understanding was that we would need their approval, but we could do a tax.
It clearly says in the JPA bond.
Okay.
We did look at that. So yes, and we would have to have the Board of Supervisors approval. In fact, I think I remember the director saying they would have to actually put it on the ballot.
So we have to find that out, and that can go back
And
to
that's
your
what
committee.
the committee will do.
Right.
And-
Okay.
And one other piece that our committee will need to look at, and this was from Julia, that we need to consult with county council before this commission approves any money for a poll. It may be that we need to set up a separate not-for-profit or political organization. We need to find out if we can use library money for a polling and that type of expense.
Okay. And David has some experience with this.
Yeah.
You can use money to fund those kind of exploratory measures prior to there being an actual initiative. Once there's a ballot measure that's on the upcoming ballot, then you can no longer use government money or public monies to fund any aspect of that campaign, obviously. But you can explore through polling and through consulting how it works and what you can expect to actually be able to accomplish. And I would want to point out also, in terms of putting measures on the ballot, that it may be that the board would have to be the ones to approve that if it were a government-sponsored ballot initiative, but there's also the popular ballot initiative pathway, in which by signature petitions gathered, a certain percentage level of registered voters can place a ballot measure on the ballot. It's a democracy.
Yeah. So I think we would just want to make sure, touch base with county council before the revenue committee says, okay, we want to spend, X thousands of dollars for these various consultants, and make sure we're good.
All right. I might add, it's really great to be having this discussion. All right. I'll get to you in a minute. Okay. I'll ask for public comment when we get to the end of this item. The Directing Search Committee, the Director Search for the Permanent Director. We just received an envelope of the next step of proposals and RFQs, and we are planning, we don't know this all yet, to meet sometime next week, either by phone or in person. Okay? That's the only update that I have there. Patrick, do you want to add to that?
I was just going to say, what's in your packet is you have an initial proposal for the salary range for the director position. You also have a number of sample job descriptions. Also in tonight's agenda, there's a document that references various feedback we received on different kinds of updates to the job description. And as you mentioned, there are 3 responses to our request for proposals for a search committee. So all of that's in your packet.
So we are proceeding. All right, before we go to item 5.2, I believe there might be some public comment.
Briefly, it's Jonathan Greenberg. I just wanted to, I understand that there's this, David and I have had some conversations about a ballot initiative, and I did express to him that, my group, Progressive Sebastopol, or my organization, Progressive Source Communications, would be willing to act as an entity, to host a ballot initiative on behalf of the people in the county and draw support, and funding for it. So I was not suggesting that the commission itself take this on with the sense that it would be the commission floating the ballot initiative or the library.
Thank you. Now we're moving to item 5.2, commission comments, input from labs, major information items. Shall we start at the Tom end?
Okay. Healdsburg lab meets tomorrow, so I don't really have anything to report from them. The Windsor lab met at the beginning of October. Very happily announced that the town of Windsor just installed a new HVAC and repaired the roof of the library, and they were delighted at that. They're planning an open house at the beginning of April, at which time they're going to put out a survey for the whole town asking what kinds of services do you expect from the library? What can we do to further engage you? And that will be part of that open house. There is an art show opened also at the beginning of October. There are 2 vacancies on the lab, and one of them, plus a student vacancy. So there are 3 vacancies. So it's relatively easy to get a quorum because we don't need many people. But it's a little difficult to get anything done because we just don't have enough. They hope that within the next month or so, and I haven't seen anything yet, they're out recruiting for new lab members. There was a question that came up, and I think it's on our agenda tonight, about are we going to get any money, and if we do, what can we do with it? And I think that's part of one of our items that we'll be discussing tonight. So have to report back to them.
Healdsburg Lab spoke with their city council?
Yes, the Healdsburg Lab spoke with the city council, made it very clear that there were several items. It wasn't just the Healdsburg Lab, a number of people.
Right.
There are a number of items in the proposed new JPA, and they were not in favor of them. The city council listened and, as city councils do, took it under advisement. Did not vote one way or the other, although there seemed to be a good deal of sentiment that they didn't care for sediment. Yeah, some of that too.
That's Healdsburg.
They didn't care for allowing certain districts to raise money to do things for their library unless everybody was in the same boat. That seemed to be something that they were not crazy about. But as I said, no decision made. On the other hand, several lab members and other people went to the commission in Windsor, and Windsor didn't have any major problems with the proposed JPA as it was presented. There was some discussion about items, but altogether got the feeling that they would, even though they don't have an absolute vote, they don't have a veto, they're okay with it, with the JPA as it was presented.
Okay. Next.
Well, I have to commend one of the staff members, Rebecca, here, for taking part of her day on a Saturday to go to Discovery Day at the Santa Rosa Fairgrounds. I had asked, because I was part of the planning committee for this, that the library be involved, the whole system. And Rebecca is, as you may know in one of our reports, we had a coding camp that we're going to be doing. And Rebecca ran a half marathon in the morning and came and spent the rest of the day. I mean, and we had over 10,000 families and kids, families there with kids and adults. And we also offered library cards. And how many do we get in the final? 15. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, and they were excited. The kids got their first library cards. So I like that. So I just have to mention that. Thank you. I think it really represented the library system. And there was over 80 different entities there presenting, including Buck and all sorts of other, Sonoma State, Santa Rosa, So it was good. It was good that we were there. That's what I'm saying. And we also did a space book club sign up for the libraries, which I have to talk to all the children's librarians, and we had started the discussion, but we're saying in January, which I think I told David, and I hope Jamie you heard about that, but I want to talk to you more about that. So, okay, enough of that. We did meet the Roanoke Park Cotati Regional Library Advisory Board met on October 15th, and at 4 o'clock. And the reason I'm telling you the time is because we're deciding that we're not getting enough members, and we're going to have to try to move it to 6:30 or 5:30. So that's going to be a big change. Probably 5:30. And they wanted me to tell everybody on the commission and on the staff here that they really appreciate the lab notes coming out. They all had copies, and they're all reading them, the notes. So that's been a good thing. And they're also very interested in the new director hire. And when in the committee, one of the things we talked about was having the job description, being able to distribute that. And they were very interested in having some input on that. So that was the highlights, basically.
I don't have a report out. I'll be attending the Santa Rosa Lab next week, and Julia will be reporting out on Cloverdale this time.
Okie dokie. Petaluma had a strong representation at the city council meeting where we discussed the JPA. And then we had a meeting after that. We revised our bylaws at the last meeting. Basically, one of the major there were two changes in the bylaws. One of them was to make a range of possible memberships so that we can get some new people who might be interested in joining to join and not have to ask some of the stalwart to leave because they are dedicated and have been there for a long time. And also, because of a history of having a member who didn't come for 2 years, we instituted a way to ask someone to leave if they miss a certain number of consecutive meetings. We are planning an open house. We have 2 tentative times on the calendar, and we'll put it together at the next meeting. Petaluma has just instituted, I think it's interesting, on Halloween, instituted self-check. I've been ill, so I haven't been able to go check out self-check. But it's apparently going well. Also, on the next long weekend, finally, the reconfigured check circulation desks will be in place, and that will happen. And also, our youth member has instituted, we don't have the exact name yet, a Facebook page for the Petaluma Library. So when you have a moment, you might want to like the Petaluma Library. So that's all I can think of. Next.
Our lab meets next week. I did go to the city council meeting about 2 weeks ago, along with the head of the Friends and the head of the lab. In the end, I was the only one who spoke. I gave an impassioned plea for equal access to resources, and despite that, the city council directed the manager to report that they were in favor of that. One of the city council members' big issue is local control, and that's how that played out. On a more positive note, 1 month from essentially today, Wednesday, December 4th, the Friends are hosting a presentation by the authors of a book entitled In Thought and Life, The Enigmatic Life of S.I. Hayakawa. So that should be an interesting event, Wednesday, December 4th, 6 p.m.
Guerneville branch meets next Wednesday, but I can report that Mari Barsky, who is the branch manager, advised me that she's announced her retirement. So I'm very, very sad about that. She'll be retiring at the end of the year, and she's been such a good person, a great branch manager, and I think she'll be sorely missed there. So there were a couple of things for Guerneville. One is the Friends, their book sale this summer. I don't think I had the exact figures last time I reported it. They made over $4,000 on their sale, which is very good for a small branch. I think that's so excellent. And their Friends group is doing gangbusters. They're saving lots of money. They're looking into the 501c3, and they have great plans for fundraising to help the library, and they've recently bought furniture and donated planter boxes and plants during the summer, so they're very active. There's lots of activities, lots of outreach to students. The children's librarian, Carol, has been doing lots of outreach, and so because of that, recently I received 2 applications for youth members for the Guerneville branch. And it's so hard to choose, so I invited them both to come to next week's meeting to meet the rest of the Library Advisory Board, and I'm hoping that there's some way we can have both of them. So if you're making a change to your bylaws, I would like to have the labs consider not putting a limitation on the number of youth members that they can have, that it might be good to have more than one youth member, and they can work as a team to do more outreach to high school students. So just a suggestion. I have to figure out how to get both of them. Sebastopol's meeting was this evening, and they also have been working on their bylaws. So I think that they finalized one part of it tonight. We had a lot of discussion about the JPA. I did attend the Sebastopol City Council meeting where the JPA roadshow was presented, and what's come up with the JPA recently, and we can talk about it more in the JPA report, is that some of the cities are wanting to put restrictions on what the commission will be able to do as far as fundraising. There, in the current draft of the JPA, the clause allows the library commissioners to raise money through a parcel tax or some other vehicle. But some of the cities have recently said, no, they want the commissioners to again, once they decide to do that, to then go back to the city councils and request permission to allow that to happen. And I think that is such a bad idea, and it would so severely restrict the commission, the next commission, that I'm hoping people will see that and will help support keeping the clause without that restriction. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I'm sorry, everybody. Sorry, Sebastopol, if I forgot something else. One thing that's very exciting that the Sebastopol Lab is looking into is trying to do outreach to citizens who are stuck in their home. So they're exploring, looking, working with some of the local agencies to find a way to get books delivered to in-home people. So it's very early stages yet. They really are just kind of the very edges of exploring that. So no promises, but it's such a fabulous idea to do. So thanks.
All right. Any public comment? Moving on to item 5.3, management report on the reduction to service of hours. We have a document for that. Quite thank you. well enumerated, thought out, and explained. Are there any comments from the commission or questions?
David and Jamie, did you write this up? Did you do the documents?
Yes.
I just want to say, great job. This is like a masterpiece.
Wow.
Seriously. Oh, no, I think.
Finally.
Yeah. But it's very clear.
Thank you. Yeah, it's an excellent report, and if I'm looking at this right, it looks like our circulation has dropped in the last year, and our patronage has dropped, and the number of library cards has dropped. And do you attribute that, do you think, to the loss of hours because people are finding that they don't have access?
There's really no way to know.
Yeah.
Interestingly, our programs went up.
Yeah.
The number of programs offered and the attendance at programs increased.
I had one question, and I second the comment that, really great job. I mean, just clear, laid out really well written. So, I mean, it's really great. Thank you. On, I guess like on the third page, there was a comment, and I just didn't understand exactly what was the reference, where it says that having the public services staff working Tuesday through Saturday has resulted in pockets of imbalances or inefficiencies in staffing at some libraries. And I just wasn't connecting in my head what that meant.
That has to do with the flow of the workload throughout the week. It seems to be very heavy on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and lighter towards the end of the week, Friday and Saturday. And on each of those days, the staffing is essentially the same. So sort of overloaded at the beginning of the week, And by the end of the week, what we're hearing from some branches is that there are basically extra staff with a lighter workload, whereas at the beginning of the week it's very stressful and strained because there's too much work and not enough people to do that volume of work.
Okay, so that our current model sort of has the same staffing each day, but the workflow isn't even.
Generally speaking, there are exceptions, especially with part-time employees and scheduling. But yes, generally.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that I found really useful in here, it's very clear that this is a significant issue, problem, state of being. And I was very impressed with the range of your identifying of it seems like a much broader scope of where the problems are than we've actually had it spelled out before. This workload on the staff, the effects on the public, all on down the line. I was also interested that 2 departments find it kind of nice. But that was really helpful for me because I think this is a good document that shows where we need to problem solve. Any other comments from commissioners? I do know that there's something in here that then we plan to bring all the information to the commission, possibly at a special study session, not yet set, but hopefully in mid-November. Could you talk a little bit more about what that's all about?
Sure, I'll take some of the pressure off Jamie here. So we realized when we started drafting this that we did not have all the information we needed in order to actually report on one of the main things we were asked to report on, which is what will it cost to reopen on Mondays, and are we best using our available staff to provide the best hours for the public that we can? And in the past, we looked at the past work that had been done, and there was a lot of work done previously on this question. What we were unable to find was a real sort of bottom-up understanding of those questions, and we decided that we would, rather than present numbers that would be a good guess, and based on previous work that had been done, we would like to sort of start over. And that would entail, in any reasonable way of looking at it, actually going to the people who do the work and making sure that we have their best knowledge. So we convened a special meeting of the branch managers and lead circulation staff last week to begin to brainstorm on these questions of what can we do with available staff, and then what would it take really logically and rationally to reopen additional hours on Monday and possibly Saturday. Or other times, just what would it cost? Shouldn't be that hard to arrive at that number. And we made some real progress on those questions. We got some real concrete feedback on, for instance, if I can just go for a second here, if you look at the amount of vacation and sick leave accrued over the course of a year by any given staff member, well, they're entitled, to 2 or maybe 3 weeks of vacation, depending on where they are in their time served, and they're entitled to a certain number of sick days. And if they took all of that, what is that number? Okay. So that's never going to happen that you're going to backfill every single hour that someone is sick or every single hour that someone's on vacation. But what is the sort of ratio? What's a logical ratio to expect? For instance, if a librarian is out, how much of their time will you backfill with a substitute, with an extra hire person? And we went around the room and we got a real sense from the branch managers and the lead circulation workers of really, for a Tech 2, for a Tech 3, for a librarian, what percentage backfill would you need? And now we have a CFO who can take those numbers and look at, well, what's the real cost per hour to backfill those, and therefore what would it cost to actually put in the right numbers into a substitute budget? And that's the kind of thing we're making real progress on. And similarly with reopening on Mondays, well, no one knows better than the branch managers what it would take to actually staff a Monday. So we went around the room and got what it would take for each branch to staff a Monday. And those numbers are now with Bruce, and he will crunch those numbers. So by the time you guys agree to come together to a study session, which would be open to the public and available for public comment as well, because it's another huge group we need to touch base with. You would be armed with some real solid numbers from staff that were vetted through our CFO, and I think we could, at that study session, come up with real solid recommended numbers.
Did the group also discuss if you have to prioritize in the short term, what is the most important, timeframes to open? For example, reading through your report, it seemed like, and this might not be right, but just it was like, a couple hours at the end of the day, Saturday, seemed very important, or was there discussion amongst the folks there about, really this is the night where if we could only have 3 more hours, it's this night, or anything like that?
Yeah, that kind of thing was discussed. And do you want to specifically talk about any of those? Or, it was just the end of day Saturday is a big one. And the 8 to 9 hour in the evening, there's a funny thing about that. It may seem that no one's hardly in the library at 8 to 9, and the library is, sort of drops off after that. But in my experience, and in the experience of most librarians I know, when you back off an evening hour, it pushes into the dinner hour for families, and they're unable to even bother to get out the door. Why bother? You have dinner at 6, you're done at 7, library closes at 8, it's going to take you 20 minutes to get there, you're not going to have any time in the library. So it's a psychological barrier to going to the library for families in the evenings, or for working people in the evenings. So, despite the fact that it may seem dead between 8 and 9, that hour makes 7 to 8 possible. So what we've seen is a real drop-off in evening use at our libraries. Just because we're closed an hour earlier, it seems disproportionately a drop-off. But I think it's that, and I'm pretty sure, it's that psychological barrier of getting out the door to the library in the evening.
Did you also discuss, or would we at this
Study session.
discuss alternatives like sister libraries and
Right.
changing hour, those kinds of things?
Right. So that, for instance, the idea of having a staggered schedule of some kind, where there would be any given evening during the week, there would be a library open, hopefully within striking distance, or if we had to stagger Mondays and Saturdays, on any given Monday or Saturday, there would be a library open within striking distance in Sonoma County. And that's a real debatable thing for me, because regionally we don't make that much sense for driving to a nearby library. If you're in Sonoma, there's not that much that's really close by. Petaluma's, you can go over Stage Gulch, but still, it's a wow. It's a drive each way.
Was any discussion on alternative days to let's say we had to stay with one closing day other than Monday? What about Wednesday? What about Tuesday? What about the 3-day, and it comes up again, it will next year 4 times.
Right.
The Saturday, Sunday, Monday closing.
I think everything has been discussed at some degree, and everything should be discussed more. That's an option.
Okay.
In Marin County, when I was there, all the libraries were closed on Friday, except one, which was open. And so they had a weird weekend. It was very difficult for staff in some ways to have that sort of staggered weekend of never having 2 days in a row off. But it's been done.
I was also wondering about the 3-day weekend closures. Maybe this doesn't make sense, and it may be more related to this than when we get to that item. But has the staff been polled as to whether they would prefer Saturdays or Tuesdays off on 3-day weekends? So, that would be interesting information to have in terms of the calendar. It might be, if the Tuesday were off after the Monday, they would still have 3 days in a row off, but the library would be open on the Saturday so that the public had access to it. And we still, by obligation, need to give people their day off. I just wonder what the staff would feel about that. Is there any other comment from the commission? There is a hint here of a study meeting, which does have the actual word meeting attached to it as another possible study session meeting in November. Are people available or up for that, or do we do a doodle, or how soon do you think you guys would be ready for us, or do we put it off till December meeting here?
Hadn't we thought about November 18th as a possible date? Oh, it's also a JPA meeting day. Possibly.
I think it is.
From 2
That's
to
a Monday.
5.
It's a possible meeting.
It's a possible,
Which
they
it
expect
prob-
everything to
probably
get
will
done on,
happen. They probably won't finish it up on the 14th.
I think they'll be using that 18th day. So, but that doesn't preclude you from meeting in the evening on a study session and your regular sort of meeting slot. I know it makes for a long day for those of you involved in the JPA review, but it just or another day, right?
Who would be at that? Who do you envision being at that meeting? Just the commission and you folks, or the managers, or?
Everybody would be invited, of course, just as with any public meeting. The interesting thing about a study session is that it's an opportunity to have a fairly in-depth discussion on a particular topic on which you are not taking a decision at that meeting. So it's really kind of a freeing thing. There can be presentations from staff. There can be presentations from anyone who wants to. You could open it out to the public. It's a really just a great opportunity, and it's it could be 3 hours of solid getting into this stuff.
how many of you could come on the 18th?
Well, it depends. I have a 4 o'clock meeting, which I suspect will go to 6, and I have to go to that meeting.
Would it be like afternoon, evening,
Evening.
morning? What?
It would have to be evening or morning, but it'd have to be evening because we've got the JPA committee meeting that usually goes till around 5 or 6 anyway, right? Helena,
Yes,
they're supposed to be
yes.
over at 5, but
5.
they
It's usually
sometimes
over about 5,
expand.
5:15.
So we could meet at 6:30 and you could come when you could get here?
Deep enthusiasm here.
I could do it. Just
Okay.
checking all my
Well,
calendars.
and it's also, it'd be great to have as many people as we can, but basically all we need is a quorum, right?
Well, we're not going to be making any.
You don't need a-
Right.
decisions.
Even
We
need-
don't
well,
even
I mean-
need a quorum.
Right, okay, so shall we,
You would, yeah, I think it would be good to have
As
at
many
least-
as we can get here.
Yeah, 3
Okay.
wouldn't seem like enough, but
all right.
you know.
November 18th is the tentative date, 6:30 is the tentative time, and this is the tentative place.
Great.
Is there any other comments from the commission regarding this report? All right, any public comment about this report?
Hi, Jonathan Greenberg yet again.
Jonathan?
The surprise. It's a fantastic report. I think it's very helpful to see. It's shocking for me to see the drop in overall patrons in the county since the closures. I believe 2.8 million to 2 million is a drop of about 25% or so. I want to say that last year when we were, I just want to inform you guys, we are planning, meaning the campaign and move on, which helps us to really go back to the supervisors yet again to ask for interim financing in that rather unorthodox manner until we raise other money. It was very difficult for me last year in representing that request that the library itself did not have a number available for us during the budget hearings for how much it would cost, as well as that the commission and the library director themselves had not taken a stand or position to say, if we receive this money, we can restore the hours and this is how much we need. And we will do this if the money was allocated. It was very disempowering as a citizen group. As we had 1,850 people, and we could have had a lot more. We tend to this year, that there wasn't that capability that we could say to the supervisors, you can do this. If you vote the money, it will be done. And so those two things are really essential. I know that it's a politically difficult situation given what you're empowered to do and how you're supposed to work within your budget. And I do appreciate that that is part of your mandate and the work of the commission. And I'm not suggesting that you guys are the ones asking for it. What I am requesting is that there be a clear number, that it happen relatively soon, because the budget hearings start in January. I was criticized by the supervisors that, this is too little, this is too late, to ask. And we will start earlier with our petition and campaign. But we would like a number, and we would like a clear expression that from the director and from the commission, should the money come, we will restore the hours. Just put the money in our bank account, and this will be done. So that's a request for both those things, and to just say that we will, be working on the ballot measure as much as we can to support it. There might be another group that would be ready to host it, and I'd be very happy for that to happen. Should nobody else come forward, we could do that. But we also will be looking for this interim, type of request. We may not get it again, but I think there is mounting public pressure and certainly mounting public will, and this report is very helpful in just showing how much this has hurt our system. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I just wanted to mention that something is really struck out at me. I just looked at the report that Jonathan had. The hours per week that you're open is dropped from 73 in 66 to 79 to 44 now. That's really dramatic. I write letters to the Press Democrat a lot, and I'm probably getting known as the county idiot, but it just shocks me, and I really can't commend you guys enough for what you do. And hang in there. Thank you.
Thank you. I did have a question about that number. 66 to 79, it was not joint powers agreement, correct?
We went back to the Santa Rosa schedules and the county library schedules that we could find in our historical files to put this table together. That's why there's some gaps in it. Oddly enough, we don't have very good records of our own being. But the Internet Archive and the Wayback Machine is a great tool, and I don't know if people heard there was a fire today at the Internet Archive, and a great deal of their scanning equipment was lost. So if you're of a mind to be contributing to anything library-wise, they'd be a good recipient as well. San Francisco, yeah.
One other point, I just wanted to a question. If you raise money by bonds, can only be spent on capital improvements, or can it also go to? Because it seems to me a bond issue might be easier to pass. I don't know.
I know for a fact, because of two bonds that were floated in Healdsburg, it can be used for other than capital.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Great. Thanks a lot.
The JPA formed in 75, correct?
Right.
David, will we have the number at the study session on the 18th?
Yes. I'm looking over at Bruce. He's nodding. Right.
Well, I know you guys are working on it. Yeah. Is that a reasonable time frame to?
Yeah.
Great.
And the other question I had is back again to what Jonathan mentioned. Would it require a formal statement or action on the part of the commission to say, if the Board of Supervisors were to give us $8 million, we would spend it on opening on Mondays? Would that require like a specific statement?
Well, it seems like a thing you might want to just do. I don't know if it's required. What do you mean required?
Well, in other words, my understanding is that Jonathan is saying that the county is saying we wouldn't give them the money because we don't have the confirmation that they would use it to open more hours. So we would need to probably make a voted statement that said, yes, you have something to say? No.
Yes, I've got a question. I have missed 2 meetings. Before I left, we had at least the beginnings of a discussion on what our priorities were. I don't know if that was concluded while I was gone.
It hasn't been.
Okay, then before we come up with a statement for the commissioners, we need to decide whether that is a priority or not.
Okay. My understanding, though, is that our issue with the priorities is what we would do with our money. And what I'm thinking we're hearing is that if the Board of Supervisors were to come to us and say, here's X amount of money to increase the hours, that would be like a donation or a donor that we would need to say that
Okay.
that's the difference.
distinction.
Because I agree that we need to deal with our priorities. But if this were to come, I think we would need to say that's what we would do with it.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions, public comment? All right, now we're moving on to item number 6, approval of the minutes. I have a question about approving the minutes. Since I was here for half the meeting or a third of the meeting, do I vote for a third or do I just abstain? But the other thing is on the minutes for the 7th, I believe I came into the meeting, I returned to the meeting on page 3 at about line 128. Just,
Yeah, the original notes that I made have the time, so I'll
Okay.
add that back in.
all right. Any other comments about the agenda, about the minutes? Agenda amendments or changes? Is that an official amendment that I just made? Okay. So can I have a motion?
So moved.
It has been moved with the amendment.
I'll
Do I have a second? Okay, it was moved by Tom, seconded by Helena. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
I will abstain also. And all those opposed? Okay. Now we can do the other meeting, the other agenda, the other minutes. Draft motion 2. Do I hear a motion
I so move.
from Helena? A second? Okay, seconded. All those, by Tom?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm
Opposed?
also abstaining.
All right. That, we move on. I didn't get a chance to look at the correspondence and press coverage. Was there any?
Yeah, there's some.
Okay.
So there was one item, correspondence-wise, that I did want to follow up on, and that was the individual who was concerned about the CD damaging their CD player. And of course, there was correspondence back from the library management. Thank you. But it was pointed out that we don't have verbiage that that states we're not responsible for damage to people's CD players. And maybe that's a good idea to have, I guess, county council or whoever the appropriate resources to draft language that would, make it clear that if someone checks out a CD or something, and it damages their equipment, we're not. I mean, it's unfortunate that it happened to this individual, but I do think we can't really set a precedent of repairing everybody's equipment. It also brings up the larger issue as we move into this digital age, you know, and I mean, I hate to even broach this, but if someone gets a ebook or something and it has a virus or damages their equipment, you know, I think we would also want statements brought out that's not just CDs, but, you know, other digital, electronic or digital, you know.
I really like the branch manager's point about that if a book was checked out and then dropped on the family cat and it hurt the family cat, would the library then be responsible for the veterinary bills?
Right.
But that's maybe not germane.
Yeah. But I think having some kind of a statement that is somewhere when you sign up for a library card or posted somewhere or something that just makes it clear. And I mean, you would hate to think that a virus or something could get into somebody's lap, you know, notepad or something by downloading a book. But, you know, if that were to ever happen, we wouldn't want to be accountable.
It's kind of a can of worms, because if someone comes into the library proper and contracts a virus of the other type, then could the library be responsible for that? I hate to get silly about this, but it seems like we could put out so many disclaimers about so many
No,
things.
so I'm suggesting one generic, broadly written disclaimer that covers us for everything. You know.
The library is not responsible for anything.
I've seen those. Enter at your own risk.
I was thinking more on the lines of electronic equipment,
I know.
hardware and software.
I just can't help thinking about it.
I'm also wondering about the issue, that other issue. Is it a problem with the labels coming off of our CDs, and what's up with that?
It can happen, and we do hear about it from time to time.
Okay.
It's not frequent.
Okay. But okay, the letter says that the car repair people throughout the county know that this is a problem, because that's probably where they go with them. Okay. Any other comments around correspondence? I'll pass this around. It's a thank you note. Okay, moving on to item number, there is nothing on the consent calendar, correct? So we'll go by item 8. We're moving on to action item by motion. And this is item 9.1. And it's regarding the insurance. I'd like to thank Patrick for getting us the information earlier so that we're not confronted with this with the deadline right at the immediate. So thank you, Patrick. Okay, any other questions or comments about that one? All right, there being none, is there any public comment regarding our getting insured? There being none, I'm ready for a motion. Oh, I did that out of order. Do I have a motion?
I move that we execute the agreement with Wells Fargo Insurance Services to provide the 2013-2014 insurance.
Okay, moved by Susan, second by Mary Evelyn. All right, any further discussion from the commission, from the public? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we execute the agreement. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? No. So it's passed with 6 yeses and 1 absent. The next issue on the agenda is the agenda item 10.1, and it's the resolution. For those of you who are, I think we're all familiar enough with this, we need to do this every year to keep going until the funds come in, basically, is what's up, right? Are there any questions about this? And it, again, must be a roll call vote. So we should probably follow the procedure appropriately. So we'll start with with a motion. Do I have a motion to?
I move that the Sonoma County Library Commission adopt the resolution requesting temporary fund transfer as needed for fiscal year 2013-2014.
I'll second.
So it has been moved and seconded. Did you get those names, Rebecca? Okay. Is there any further commission discussion or questions?
I had one question. Do they charge us interest?
Yes.
What rate do they charge us?
Typically, it would be the county pool's interest rate. So monthly, they would go through and they'll calculate whatever that is. It's not a whole lot. I mean, it's
May
not.
I have your attention? The library will be closed in 20 minutes. If you'd like to check out library materials on your card, please go
Just
to
relax
the
for a few minutes.
Library cards can be issued for another 5 minutes. If you need to make copies or print, please do so now. Also, the bathrooms will be closed in 10 minutes. Thank you. Su atención, por favor. Necesita estar en 20 minutos. Si usted desea sacar materiales de la biblioteca o necesita obtener una tarjeta de la biblioteca, favor de ir al escritorio de circulación ahora. Tarjetas de la biblioteca pueden ser emitidas por otros 5 minutos. Si necesita imprimir fotocopias o imprimir algo de la computadora, favor de hacerlo en este momento. También los baños se cerrarán en 10 minutos. Gracias.
Okay, so I don't know the exact, rate, but the county pool, much like a lot of agencies, monthly or quarterly, they'll allocate their interest earnings out to everybody that had cash in the pool. And so in the case of this, if we actually end up having to be covered by them, they will charge us interest at the lost opportunity that they experienced because they were using their money to pay our bills. I can't imagine that it's more than 3 or 4%, but I can check in and
I'm just,
yeah.
as a banker, curious.
Yeah, no, and
Get a better deal?
I probably should have. I actually saw the people a couple of times this week. And I should have asked them because you get these governmental interest rates. If you owe the IRS some money, it won't be 3 or 4%. But I'm sure they just charge their pool rate.
Okay, thank you.
Other commission questions? All right. Is there any public comment on this item? It has been moved and seconded to pass this resolution. We need to take a roll call vote. Can you call the names, Rebecca?
I can, yes.
Very good.
Arnold,
Yes.
Colbert,
Yes?
Gustafson,
Yes?
Heavenridge,
Yes.
May,
Yes.
Whistler.
Yes.
So it has been approved. Oh, man, we're just clicking through this one. Oh, somehow I've lost my agenda. Moving on to
The library director job description.
the library director job description. I would like to say before we start this that the reason that this is really overtly on the agenda is, again, in that spirit of including as much input as possible as we proceed in this process of selecting a new director. And we have had several of the commissioners have spoken with their labs about ideas for the job description for the director, but I felt it would be really useful for us to directly open it up to the public and the commission. So, that being said, are there ideas or additions to the job description for the next director? Any input from the commission?
I have had some input, one of which is do you think would be beneficial to add something in the job description about negotiations, contract negotiations, and the experience in accomplishing, reaching a contract? Which section?
It says add requirement for experience.
Oh. And to strengthen, yes, include responsibility for building community relationships. To strengthen the part about the liaison with the labs and, strengthening that relationship between the library and the library advisory boards somehow. Yeah. So that's the input. Oh, and there was a concern was expressed. It's under the skill and ability too. There was some concern about what is meant by control of the budget, and I have an opinion, but there was some concern that control might be interpreted, like control. Like
what line is it?
It is on page 3, skill and
Line
ability
17.
is successfully develop, control, and monitor the library's budget and expenditures. And so when we had this discussion at the Library Advisory Board, my interpretation of that was that the director would be on top of what was happening with the budget. But the interpretation that some of the members had was somewhat different, and they were concerned about, I think there's been suspicion sometimes from the public and some members of the community that money was being hidden. So I think that's how control might be interpreted by some people. So,
okay, Bruce, is control a financial term? I mean, is that a common term for budget management?
Well, you have, like your internal controls that auditors are always concerned about, your checks and balances, etc. I'm not quite sure the context of what in this job spec.
it says skill/ability to successfully develop, control, and monitor the library's budget and expenditures.
So maybe the word manage is better than control, because the point is they have to live within the budget, right? I mean, and we have all these policies about when they have to come to us for authorization.
Right, and not exceeding
maybe,
certain areas.
And there's a CFO but maybe some level of oversight or management to ensure that they're within the budget.
That sounds like a good, because it is a little bit, what does that mean exactly? So manage is clear.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, okay. Other input, comments?
I had one thing. In the first section, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, add requirement for experience in labor relations. I think that might be asking a little much. So I would suggest, rather than a requirement, it is desirable to have experience, or an alternative would be with labor relations rather than negotiation. Of course, the person may never have had the opportunity to actually sit down and be the negotiator, and we have a group of negotiators with us right now who do a very nice job. This says to me that the next library director ought to be a labor negotiator, and I think that's asking a lot.
Other folk?
I agree.
So how would you state it? You'd say
I would either
experience?
say it's desirable rather than a requirement, or instead of labor negotiations, make it labor relations. negotiations is it's a term of art. And I don't know that we even want the director to be sitting at the table being the principal negotiator.
And I don't think I'm saying that, but it does sometimes help to have had it in the past, to understand the process.
Yeah. I guess
May I have your attention,
rather than
please?
make it a
The library will
requirement.
be closed in 10 minutes. If you'd like to check out materials, please go
Any
to the
thoughts from you
center
guys on
desk.
that?
Materials are not checked out after closing.
What did you say?
So
The library is going to close.
please take about,
So we have a little break here while we,
Right.
Los materiales no son verificados después de la hora de cerrar.
Yeah, so I guess I would maybe suggest take out requirement, just say experience of labor negotiations a plus, or labor
Or desirable.
relations a plus,
Desirable.
instead of saying
Yeah, I would
requirement.
like to see that
Take out requirement.
eliminate the candidate.
Yeah.
Just such a big part of our life.
We hope not for a while.
Yeah.
other comments from the commissioners?
I think having desirable in there on that one, because I do think it is something that has been pretty significant the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
And if you just swap it out and say desirable, then
Instead of saying requirement.
Can I ask where you would put the desirables in this? Wouldn't that be in a job announcement more than in a job description?
well, sometimes a job description will say the minimum requirements.
Right, this one has to have.
And then has, below that,
Yeah, that's,
and another
so we need a new section in the,
has a section that says desirable,
Desirable.
which would then identify additional experience that you'd like, but isn't a minimum qualification for a person to be considered.
the way I've seen that approached is that you do that when in the job announcement rather than in the actual formal description, because what the announcement indicates what you're looking for in applicants. And yes, it's desirable that we find people who have experience with labor relations and possibly negotiations. And you can put in a lot of statements there. We think it would be nice if you had an MBA, but it's not. So I see a whole laundry list of things that would be nice to have and that we'd be looking for and that might tilt it in your direction if you're an applicant. But if you put it and codify it as part of the job description, I think you're locking yourself into something bigger than what we're talking about. So I think maybe we framed the discussion not quite exactly right in terms of what we're trying to get from the public and from all of us is, well, what do we want to see in this person and how can we put it out there? Part of it can be in the description, job description itself, perhaps, but mainly, how are we going to announce this to the world of what kind of person we're looking for? That was my thought. Maybe Patrick has some more concrete input on that, though.
But for example, having the candidate graduate from a library school program accredited by the American Library Association, that would go under, in my mind, a minimum qualification.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a legal requirement, and it's not. Yeah, it is in our requirement, so that's.
Right.
We're also going to seek the assistance of a search firm, are we not here?
Right.
And I am certain that they will have some suggestions how to best, word this. We all run into that. Okay, that's what you think, but our experience says say it this way or that way.
Patrick?
I've always thought that that's been very helpful.
I would just say I concur with David's comments. While we're looking at any possible edits to this job description, I think we're also looking at this to be a forum for, are there other things that we'd be interested in, or we'd hope to find in a candidate, because we'll also be using this information to communicate with the search firm, to draft the job announcements, the communication pieces, those kinds of things, as well as down the road also develop appropriate interview questions. So.
And it's my understanding, we hope to even start this process before the next meeting.
Well, first of all, we're hoping to have a draft job description ready for approval by this group at the December meeting.
Okay.
And also be approving a search firm at the December meeting.
All right. Helena has a...
Well, so how do we get our suggestions? Are they all going to be incorporated into this? Or okay. And so all of these ones that have already been collected, are they going to be incorporated too? Or, because I have to say I agree with them.
Unless
I
there's
think they're all
anything
very
that
good
anybody
suggestions.
disagrees with vehemently, I would think these are all, they all seem, just looking at them, they all seem fine. I mean, I don't think there's any, like, as Tom said, or whoever was it said that, we'll give this to the search firm, they'll massage it into a nice announcement that'll get us exactly the right person.
Oh, good.
But I think what we really want to hear from is the public,
Right.
especially, and what are the characteristics that they're looking for. I mean, you can only get so exact, but there might be characteristics that the public who are here would like to bring forward. So, and also that the commissioners vet everything that's been brought forward and bring anything additional.
Could I ask? We have that firm that's looking at the different classifications. Thank you, and pay. Where are they on that? Have they been able to? Because one of the things we'd asked is if they look at the director's position first. And
Patrick has a comment on that.
May I have your attention, please? The library will be closing in 3 minutes. We will no longer be able to check out your materials. Please exit through the front door. The library will be reopened tomorrow at our normal hour. Thank you and good night. Su atención, por favor. La biblioteca se cierra en 3 minutos. Ya no podemos verificar materiales. Favor de salir por la puerta principal enfrente del edificio. La biblioteca abre mañana a la hora normal. Gracias y buenas noches.
So the consultant that we've engaged for the class and compensation study will be receiving the same information. I asked them to hold off until after tonight's meeting, and they'll be helping us to also draft a job description that incorporates these items. And the subcommittee has already received a copy of a template that they've used for other library director positions, just to get a sense. But yeah, we'll be communicating this information to them.
Hi, I'm late, so this may already have been covered. In terms of drafting the director's position, one of the things we asked the classification study to do was give us it's not called a price range, it's called a wage.
Salary.
Salary range, thank you very much. Do we have a timeline for when they might be able to provide that, since that's an important
They've already provided that, and I gave it to the subcommittee this evening, and so we'll be reviewing that next week before making a final recommendation.
Thank you.
Is there any other input in either the specific requirements for the job description or the desired elements in a library director that we have from the commission? So now's the time for the public to speak. If there are other public input into either the job description or the desired skills and personality types and ability to walk on water, or on books, a collection of books.
I just don't believe we have copies of all of
The copies are on the back table, aren't they?
I don't know, of the job description.
Yeah, it's in the packet.
I only got in January.
So, there being none, if you come up with something in the next few minutes, I'll let you interrupt the agenda where we are to say what you want to say. So we will move on. Okay, discussion item 11.2, implementation and guidelines for the Library Advisory Board budgets. And this is at the September meeting, we approved that each advisory board lab would receive $500 annually. What are the intentions around what this money should be spent on? And we need to, then the staff will develop guidelines for purchasing and reimbursements that can be shared with the labs. Okay. You had something?
Oh, I think you know, up to the lab in terms of how they use it, but generally, you know, for community outreach. I know when I was on the Santa Rosa lab, we had an event where we hosted city officials and gave them a tour, and, you know, it's to cover, you might want to have, you know, wine and cheese and whatever. So I think that we shouldn't dictate too closely, I don't think, as to what kind of community outreach or advertising that they may want to do. But that, in my mind, that's what it should be available for.
You, Julia?
I would agree. I would say that we would want a policy that says it is up to the lab to determine the appropriate use, but the parameters are for patron and community outreach that is to inform and or seek feedback from on library issues and programs. So basically, I think we do want to provide them with the parameters that it is meant to be used for outreach to the public or to elected officials who are actually still members of the public. And it is designed to be for either informing the public or seeking feedback on library issues or programs that they're trying to announce. I guess I have a concern about the term advertising, because I'm not sure advertising I think of as, I mean, I would think that you could list saying that, you know, allowed to, the list to include, but not limited to community events, public announcements in local papers, mailing, printing, those types of costs, I think are appropriate, and you can list them as examples. I would also put a prohibition in the policy on money going to any member of the lab. So, for instance, and we, I don't know if we want to, but I was thinking we may want some limitations on spending the money for certain services. Like, do we want to allow graphic design, money spent on graphic design? Do we want to allow it for an event planner? Do we want, I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, I think that, you know, I'm thinking like in Cloverdale, they participate in the, Friday night event that they have in the summer.
Farmers market?
Well, it's like it's a Friday night event, and they pay some modest fee,
Right.
and there's a, you know, I know a lab member and his kids went and, you know, staffed the table and gave it, you know, had reading with the kids, and, you know, I don't know that I don't think we should try to write it so narrow that we're going to anticipate every community event or activity. I also think, you know, it's $500, and these are people who, you know, they're on the lab, they're going to have good judgment, and I wouldn't want to start excluding things, and, you know, now we're writing this really detailed policy when, you know, the idea is it's available for their use and their good judgment on, you know, whatever is appropriate in their community. And, you know, maybe it is a newspaper ad to say, we're going to be at the Friday night event, stop by our table, you know.
And I think you also, how do you reimburse without paying somebody?
Well, I don't think we should prohibit reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses of lab members, but for instance, if you have a graphic designer on the lab, do you want to allow them to receive $200 to design the flyer? That's not an unheard of situation. And so I guess my druthers, that's a real word, is to say, yes, reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses is fine, but if there are services being provided, those should be donated, free of charge.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure the distinction.
I think for this period of time, it's not a lot of money. That if the parameters are that the labs use the money, the funds for outreach to the public, to gather information, to for surveys, and to find out what the public thinks about library services or what the public wants, as long as it's within that those parameters, I think that their judgment on what to use that funds for, that we should leave it up to them at this year. And I did have 2 suggestions on how the money could be handled. And both suggestions were that it be somehow given to the branch managers, maybe a line item in their budget, and that the lab get paid from their branch manager these funds. So that there is somebody outside the lab kind of keeping track of the funds, just for this period of time, so that both the labs and the commission can get a feel for how this could work. The other suggestion Sebastopol gave me tonight was not to allow the funds to carry over from year to year. That if the $500 isn't used up in this year, then it goes back into the pool to be $500 next year, or however the commission wants to handle that.
I think that's actually a really good idea, because it might encourage activity. Some of the labs are very active, others not so much. And if there was the idea of, gee, we have this $500 and we haven't done much outreach, maybe we should do something because we're going to lose it. It might spur some activity in some of the labs that haven't done a lot of community outreach. And others, of course, do a lot.
And then at the end of the fiscal year, we can get feedback, or before the budget, too close to the budget, but at the end of the fiscal year, we can get feedback on, how they wanted to use it, how it worked.
It could also be an item on the agenda for the Old County Lab,
Yes.
assuming we still have one next year.
I kind of feel that, these people have all been appointed by us. They've been come and they've been recommended, and we all voted, yes, they're members of the lab, and someone has met them and vouched for them, I guess. So I would give them the broadest possible authority to do what they think is the best thing. And then, as Helena, as you pointed out, at the end of the year, take a look. And if they say, wait a minute, they didn't spend anything, or they spent $499 and 300 of it was on a party for the lab, then, we could look a little bit at that. But to begin with, I think what we want to do is give the labs as much opportunity and as much leeway as we possibly can, because what we're trying to do is encourage the labs to become more active and to get involved in more things. So let's trust them.
I agree with all of those sentiments. I have a concern that we need to give enough direction that it's public money. Even though it's only $500 per lab, it's still public money. So we need to give enough direction that it is not spent inappropriately, because it's public money.
Right, but if we say it's for outreach, it's for input, it's for education about the library, and we can list some broad categories, and then let them determine. I'm just uncomfortable getting into you can spend it this way, you can't spend it that way in a tactical sense.
What about a prohibition on paying lab members for anything other than reimbursement for out-of-pocket expenses?
Well, again, they're a group, and I kind of think that this year we should have them report how they spent the money. But again, they're a group, and maybe there is somebody on the lab that should be paid money for doing some special graphic design. I don't know how that would work for outreach, but it has, as long as it's connected to the general parameters.
Also, we have a graphic designer on staff. But,
Right. So
Well, that was just an example. I mean,
if
I'm
the
not-
branch, right, if the branch managers are kind of holding the funds too, and they're just giving them out to the labs as things come up, or is that a bad idea?
what were you going to say, Dave?
Oh, well, I was going to give an example from my own history with a support group of a case where that support group, upon consideration, decided to pay a member of the group who was giving a heavy discount on doing a certain kind of work from his own profession, basically at cost rather than any kind of pay. That was a good deal for that group, and it was the best use of the money in that case. It seemed like we weren't going to find anybody else who was going to do that work for that kind of money. So I think if you can give the kind of broad strokes, and this would be a procedure, not a policy of the commission, so we're not going to formalize this in such a way that we bring it back to you again for a vote. We just want a direction so that we could write a procedure that would work. And then I really like the idea of evaluating it at the end of the fiscal year and see how it went this first time around.
Bruce, is there anything that you would like to add to this?
You are dealing with public money, and you have an obligation to some sort of assurances that it's being spent for its intended use and it's, a benefit to the public. It's very hard to have any kind of oversight if there's no parameters on what the money is supposed to be used for. I'm also, in my experience, because I had one of my tasks in prior experiences was monitoring a very large travel budget for the organization. Everybody is really reasonable until you give them some money, is my experience, without any parameters. Then it suddenly becomes what's reasonable to one person is just outrageous to the other. And so I would recommend that there needs to be some sort of guidance, what the money is supposed to be. If it's supposed to be used for outreach, is there a definition somewhere of what outreach is? It doesn't have to be constraining, but I can almost guarantee you it will be a problem if you just give people $500 and say, do what's best for the library.
So you will be involved in the drafting of the procedure?
I'm going to quit coming up to the microphone.
What do you think about the idea of having the branch managers being the ones to, give, to actually reimburse or give out the money, or do you feel it should be central?
Yeah, I think that it should be reimbursement based. Whether we distribute that out to the branch managers or we keep that in the budget office, there's pros and cons. It might be more efficient out at the branch office, out the branches. You might be able to argue there'd be a little more control over it at the budget office. I'm not as concerned about who's going to, take in the reimbursement form, because in order to get paid, it's going to have to come up here. I'm really concerned about some just really general guidance on what the use of the money is for, and just for protection of the library, and newspapers love this kind of stuff.
What about, this is just I'm not sure if it's a good idea, it's just an idea. Sometimes I think I have good ideas. This is just an idea. Suppose the branch manager would have to sign off on the expenditure or agree to the expenditure or whatever. I know that.
Well, I just wanted to say, I would think that the library advisory boards would have to approve expenditures at their meetings,
Okay.
right? And commissioners attend those meetings too. So if there were guidelines that, weren't like down to the nth detail, but said outreach and seeking public, opinion and things like that, with perhaps a few examples. And then there's a process that would have to be observed. They have to do things in their meetings. They can't just go, okay, let's have a party. And there is some oversight there. The commissioners attend the meetings, as do usually library staff. I would think that, and if the branch managers had to, with a reimbursement vehicle, they attend those meetings also.
The branch
Seems like-
managers, so they would be your eyes and ears, so to speak, and they could, sign off, say, yeah, this was an appropriate expenditure of the money, and they did, certain things, and we would process it.
And the labs would have to vote, though, as a group, that
Right.
this is something we want to use this money for. So there's a lot of different safety nets there.
And there are some guidelines. There's some things that you can't use public money for. And we probably should have a general list of those. Because somebody coming in might think, oh, well, we can do that. It's our, But there are some things, some guidelines in terms of you can't use public money for certain things.
Can you use public money to buy wine?
Well, I've been in public agencies that have done it.
Okay. I mean, if you're going to have
If you can connect
I don't know if
it.
it's right or wrong, but there was an attorney there.
Okay, I'm just wondering, because if you're going to have a public event
and
and
you're
you're,
public purpose, if you can
Yeah.
connect the event to a public purpose, to furthering of something.
oh,
We have a wine library, after all.
yeah, I'm just,
Yeah, to have a case of wine delivered to one of the lab members.
no, but for the event, that, okay. All right, are there any other commission comments? Are you guys getting good direction? Is there any public comment?
Hi, my name is Padma Patel, and I'm on the Guerneville Library Advisory Board. And usually I can't come to these meetings because I work on Monday nights, so it's extraordinary for me to be here. So I'm sorry I didn't get the documents. I wasn't sure I was going to be here. My thoughts about the $500 are some of what Elena is saying, I think, is maybe being taken for granted, but I'd like to say it. I think that expenditures it should be said that expenditures over some amount, and you may have said this while I was reading something else, over $100 have to be pre-approved by the whole library advisory board. My concern is not so much how the money is spent, although I think it's tied to that, is that some individual member may just decide something is a good expenditure and the rest of the board may not think so, so that pre-approval of larger amounts, I think, if you want to spend $25 on, pencils, I don't think we need to micromanage that. So I would like to see a number, and I guess I would like to see all the library advisory boards have similar guidelines. Like an amount over $100 has to be approved by the whole library advisory board. I'm not so worried about how it's reimbursed. I'm more worried about how it's spent, and that people may have real differences of opinion. I'd hate to see one member think it's a good idea to spend $449 on advertising in a certain way when the rest of the board hasn't approved it. So it's a process that I'm thinking should be universal among the boards and not individually decided. And I actually did have a comment about the hiring document, the job description document, if I may.
You may, I promised.
Thank you. When you were discussing it, it seemed to me there was a confusion between, and someone, David, I believe, alluded to this, between requirements and job description. In my mind, those are different. One thing is what you do on the job, and the other thing is what background you should have as a minimum requirement or desirable requirements. And it sounded like when you were talking, those were kind of getting merged together.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? Does staff have enough information to proceed? Have just a wonderful month.
I would like to say one more thing, though. I think all money should be approved by a lab. I think that should be the procedure, is that everything gets approved by the group before it gets spent, because you could easily have 6 different people spending small amounts and whittling away at this with something that doesn't accomplish what we're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Moving right along to item number 11.3 for discussion. Interim co-directors' aspirations, intentions. Now we finally get to it. Thank you for your patience of waiting to speak to us about it.
We don't know who wants to do this. It's been so long. This is October 7th we wrote this. So, and I think so far, most of what we were talking about in terms of intentions is how we've been proceeding, sort of begin as you mean to go on kind of thing. So you can see some things already seem to have been sort of log jams breaking up, which is how we sort of saw what we wanted to do, right? Find what the low-hanging fruit are and go pick them and eat them. So, well, I don't want to carry on too far with that metaphor, though, so I'm going to leave it right there. So some things that we haven't really covered yet are the things we wanted to talk about with you all. Specific recommendations on the reverse side for commission discussion, and including some things that might make it easier for us to get more done, like moving from having monthly updates on the focus and finish goals to the quarterly, more detailed ones, rather than have the monthly narrative ones included. That we think that seems adequate, and it just seems like a little bit of an extra burden that might be lifted now and for a time, depending on how it goes. And it's a little late, of course, number 2 at this point, to re-examine the focus and finish priorities for this current fiscal year or this current library year, which really ends February 28th. But there are some goals for which the library director is identified as lead manager, and a lot of them have to do with policy development and so on, that we probably just won't get to. We don't claim to have that kind of expertise necessarily, nor do we see it necessarily as an immediate priority. There are some policies that have been sitting around sort of waiting to be vetted and approved that we would like to bring forward and just get them through the process. So some of those things would get accomplished. But do we have any specific examples of the kinds of things in focus and finish for which the director was lead that we could see asking be removed? Maybe, maybe not. There were some CFO ones. Petaluma book drop redesign. I think these things may just, what we could do is continue to report on them on a quarterly basis as project on hold pending time or new director or something like that. So if that's acceptable, we just didn't want to assume that everything would be up in the air. Strategic planning is a huge one. And I think we do have that listed specifically, called out here specifically in number 4. Number 3 was to move to quarterly updates on performance management rather than monthly, and requesting that rather than give a position-by-position spreadsheet on who has done what with which employees across the last month in terms of evaluations and work plans, that be made more general. I think that would be a morale boost in a way also, especially for those people who have a large span of control and can easily see that, it's easy for me. I have one person I supervise directly, so if I've got his 0 in my little box, I feel great. But then there's people like Keo who have, 400 people in their span of control. That's a huge exaggeration, but so then they would show, 20 not done or whatever, and that doesn't feel good. And especially to be called out sort of particularly by name or position doesn't feel good, so.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
Do you feel that at this point, the culture of the organization has shifted to where doing evaluations is understood as a non-negotiable, activity that must be done? And I think
Apparently not. There's a lot of, just among the management team, people who haven't had evaluations or for each other over recently. I mean, I've never had one, and there are other people who've just never had one. So I think it's perceived as pretty non-negotiable, especially for line staff. But really, it should have been more of maybe a top-down approach rather than a dictated bottom-top. Or it should have been leadership by example more than than it has been.
And I guess from my view, and other commissioners may see it differently, but part of the reason we said we wanted to see it every month and have people's names and, that level of visibility was maybe a sense of frustration that, it didn't seem to be in the culture, DNA and culture of the organization. Like this, people deserve an evaluation. Right. They need to be told, here's where you need to improve, but they also need to be told, here's where you did great.
Absolutely.
And they need that. It's not fair.
Right.
And I realize it's time consuming, and no one likes to write them, but it's one of those things, you got to do them. Yep. So the attempt of, that was, at least from my view, the commission's attempt to try to reach down and say, this is really important and we want it to happen.
Okay.
So I'm not stuck on it has to be that report, that format every month. I'm actually more interested in what could we do to bring it forward to make it happen.
Right. And
in
I think
a positive way.
that has happened. I mean, I know Patrick has done a lot of work on getting the information out to people and assuring that the people who had not yet been trained in the performance management process have received that training. I think there had been some gaps, and I don't think those gaps are there so much anymore. But maybe Jamie wants to weigh in on that too.
I mean, maybe there's other things that we could do, to encourage this to be done, other than just, the flash.
Give out
on the
iPads for the
reporting,
people who do the most or whatever.
Take out what?
Give out iPads for the people who do the most or whatever. Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think one of the obstacles has been just the level of staffing. That kind of goes back to our earlier discussion about skeletal staffing and restoring hours and adequate staffing levels. I think there has been somewhat of a cultural shift, and I think it would be one of the things that the commission could do to encourage it and improve the percentages even more would just be to increase the staffing levels, because frankly people don't have time. I think it's a time issue for most of the managers to get off desk into a room, private conversation time to have with the employees.
Right. Is it appropriate, or would it be reasonable to talk about trying to streamline the review process and maybe have, it's supposed to be an annual review, but then there's a 6-month follow-up. I know that as well. Is there a way to streamline maybe the 6-month follow-up and not have it quite as detailed as the annual review, or would that help? I guess that's the first question.
I think the interim review is already pretty streamlined. I've had 15-minute or 30-minute sessions with employees on an interim evaluation. Those go pretty quickly. We could reassess the entire format and process to try to streamline it, but that would involve reconvening some sort of staff committee to look at that.
In your opinion, would that be worth it, or no, more work than it would be worth?
I think it could be worth it. Patrick, do you have anything to add?
I do think that we're close to a point where we do need to reevaluate the process. I do know when we first started out with this, what we didn't want was sort of a checklist kind of mentality that you didn't really have to think about the process. You just marked off the boxes, went down through a list. There wasn't really any discussion or dialogue with the employee. And so that's one of the reasons for the format that we have now. But as Jamie says, it does take a considerable amount of time, which managers and supervisors just frankly don't have right now. But I think it's open for some brainstorming about, are there some other ways to approach it now that we've been through a cycle, so to speak?
Well, and I guess from my point of view, I agree you don't want to do just a checklist and here's the boxes and there you go, there's your, on the other hand, checklist is better than no evaluation. I mean, if the choice is something less than ideal and nothing, then maybe you need to step it down a little.
I think what I'm sensing is that in terms of your item number 3, that the major issue that people are saying is let's increase or make sure that it becomes enculturated. And if it turns out that quarterly reports is able to do that, I think we're getting an agreement that we don't need the spreadsheet with who's good and who's bad and who's not. And that we also are opening the door to evaluating the evaluation system.
Okay.
And perhaps it's time to relook at that. Am I summarizing what I've been hearing?
Great. And we may actually get some interesting data and feedback on that sort of as a byproduct of the class and comp study. I've been seeing comments frequently on those already about in the section where each staff member is asked who reviews your work. That's not meant to be about evaluations. It's meant to be about regular check-in with whoever your supervisor is. But invariably, or not invariably, but pretty often in the course of that little paragraph that they write, they say, and I'm supposed to be, or I have been evaluated regularly, or whatever, and they'll make some comment about that. So that could provide some useful data for us, and we may get some feedback from our consultant on that. I was always told that the best format for a evaluation was a blank sheet of paper, in which you type what the person did. But maybe that's not true. And then the last thing on our little list, number 4, is we do have this strategic plan idea looming out there that you've all talked about, and right now it's on the focus and finish, I believe, solely as a responsibility of the director to get going. And we would really like help from the commission on this. It would be another wonderful opportunity for an ad hoc subcommittee of some sort who would just love to get their teeth into the strategic planning process to put together. But, you don't have to, because you don't even know how long. I mean, I would say act as if you're going to be here forever, but, no one is. So it's up to you.
I'll just begin this discussion by saying, personally, since I just took the last strategic plan out of my little gray bag, and it was written 20 years ago?
Was it really?
So there was one like 2000.
13 years ago.
13 years ago. They fly so fast when you're in your 60s. Anyway, that perhaps this could even be tabled until we have a new JPA and a new committee and a new commission, whatever that may be. And if it doesn't happen, then we can take it off the table sooner. But part of what's a piece of the JPA revision is a requirement for a strategic plan. It feels to me like this perhaps maybe not the time to be doing a strategic plan, but I'm only speaking for me. No, you can't do that because I've just spoken for me. The rest of the commission needs to put their piece in.
I would ask that maybe we wait and see what happens with the JPA. I mean, part of it is this is a 7-person commission, and we have
Three ad hoc
JPA
committees,
subcommittee, personnel subcommittee, search subcommittee, finance subcommittee, and there's only 7 of us.
Right.
And so I would say once the JPA is done and that subcommittee is finished, then you will either have still 7,
Right.
but one less subcommittee and some people maybe with more time on their hands, or you'll have 10 commissioners, or 12, or possibly 15, or who the heck knows. But you'll have more commissioners to assign.
And a new director, a permanent
Right.
director. And I think that this is partly in that world also.
Okay, that's fine. That makes much more sense. I mean, this I did, like I said, we wrote this a month and a half ago. So looking back on it to then, and really we were thinking about this in early September. So it seemed like we had more time then. And now it seems like we have less time.
Really? Is there anybody who disagrees with that perspective? I don't want us to plow ahead on that.
No, and it says pending hiring a new director, so that makes sense.
Okay, so then we kind of, no, we didn't, it's not that it, don't that it yet. You just mentioned number one, is it okay to do a quarterly report, update on focus and finish, and we have not given our yes or no to that. And I think we're okay on number two. I think we've said we'll just, but the question on the table for discussion is it all right to have a more extensive quarterly report on focus and finish rather than the monthly report?
Wait, before we leave number two.
All right.
I don't have a problem with the focus and finish, just I would like to see the project still left in focus and finish, not take any of them out and just say this is awaiting, our permanent director or whatever the situation is, because I think things drop off, they get lost, and it would be good to keep an eye on that particular thing. When we're talking about re-examine of focus and finish priorities, is it possible at the next meeting for you guys to have gone through what is currently assigned to the director and let us know what you think needs to be done before the permanent director is hired, what needs to get started, and what you view as the priorities in terms of the things assigned to the director or the policies waiting to be. I know we have a long list of policies, and I would like us to look at one more time how we're prioritizing what needs to be done in our current situation. Is that a huge amount of work we're asking?
I think we could do that.
Okay, now moving back to number one. The quarterly updates. What is the commission's sense on doing quarterly updates as opposed to the monthlies? I'm seeing a nod. I'm seeing a half nod.
I think these, they're wonderful, but it takes a lot of time and work to put one of these together every month. And a lot of the things don't make giant leaps every month. So I'm perfectly okay with quarterly.
I think that's fine. Quarterly updates, unless something gets completed, that you can tell. Or you have a problem with something.
All right.
The other commissioners?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I would agree quarterly.
All right, so is there any public input on this particular agenda item?
Right.
I have no idea why I just thought of this now, and if I'm out of line, have we begun the search for the CFO?
It will be shortly blasted out. It was possibly.
It went on the public site today.
It's on the public site today, and we're going to be putting it out into various venues where people of that ilk hang out. We have an informant now who's telling us where CFO types hang out.
And did we see a copy of the job description? Just for
It's on the public website.
Okay.
It's the announcement, not the description, right?
When we do the re-examination of priorities, is it possible to also call out those that are currently awaiting an interim? I'm not sure why I just thought of this, but we had on the table re-examination of our software, and the county is going to be changing their software on their timetable regardless of whether we have a new CFO or not. And I don't want us to get stuck without looking at that. Is that something that's on your radar?
Yes, we're well aware of that, and I think a lot of the policies are also financial related, and were previously assigned to the Administrative Services Division Manager, so we can look at any of the priorities that were earmarked for the director or the Administrative Services Division Manager.
Okay.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 11.4, the transition team plan. This, I believe, is a PowerPoint, isn't it? Because I think I've seen it. Can the commission see the screen?
Not well.
Should we go sit in the audience?
Should we move?
Can we sit in the audience for
We
this?
just either turn the screen or we'll move. What's easier?
Well, then you're going to have to...
Yeah.
All right.
Eyes in the back of my head.
Gonna send the cameras crazy.
So we've been asked to prepare what would be our method and plan for informing and educating a newly seated commission, theoretically as early as February 1st.
David,
But you all
what's
should
the
act as if
document
you are
I'm
still the
looking for?
commission.
What's the document I'm looking for here?
Oh, you're looking for, it's on the,
It's not now, though.
it's not there.
This one?
JPA presentation, transition plan presentation. There it is, JPA transition plan presentation.pdf, right. Okay. Oh, it's a PDF. It's not the PowerPoint. Okay. So I can read you the slides, or I can just sort of say what's on them. I'll probably just say what's on them generally. This plan has a number of components. It has how we will communicate with the community overall and our patrons, how we'll communicate with staff, a whole series of what the background documents are, calendars, you know, a little summary, some briefings that we could schedule in workshops, and then, of course, you guys, being the commission who's outgoing, talking to the commission who's incoming. That's what commissioner to commissioner means. So in terms of communicating with our patrons and the community, we would, of course, go out and we're already doing this, making presentations to city councils and boards of supervisors. We could do more of those. We'll be presenting to the city managers group later this month, for instance, sort of bring them up to speed on this. We'll provide ways for people to get in touch with each other, in touch with the individual commissioners. For the public, I think that's already on our website, and we'll just continue to do that. All of the stuff that you do. There was some talk about having a big reception and ceremony, and we'll be buying cases and cases of, no. We have a party. And, of course, there will be the obligatory public workshop on the budget in the spring, which because the commission would no longer be having to submit a budget to the county would really shift the whole schedule for the budget process. Here, I'm going to turn this over to Jamie.
Okay, so communications with library staff include offering the roadshow presentation to them, and that's already been completed. We had 6, I think, different sessions that staff were invited to see the same presentation that's gone to all of the city councils and the board that goes over all of the JPA language, proposed language changes. We've already talked about providing the contact information for commissioners to the public, and of course that would be available to staff as well. Another idea to have a reception for the library staff so that they could meet and speak with commissioners, and to schedule tours for commissioners so that they have an opportunity to see all of our buildings and have a chance to talk and meet with the staff. This next section is regarding bringing on the new commissioners smoothly, and what we have in mind is to provide them with basically an entire binder of background information, as well as holding some introductory workshops that would go over some legal material and include just basics about the library, such as our budget, where we are with labor relations issues, any contracts that need to be approved, that sort of information.
And a training on the Brown Act? Yes.
That's in the list. So this list here of workshops and briefings would include the library's current plans and priorities, such as our focus and finish at the time that the new commission is seated. We would go over our budget, of course. We would share human resources issues and, again, labor relations issues. Make sure they're informed about the labs and the role of the labs. Make sure they're acquainted with all of our facilities issues, the collections, technology, and then legal topics, which would include things like the Brown Act. And then make sure they have a basically a master schedule of what throughout the course of the year the commission is responsible for taking action on.
Okay. So one of the things that the JPA Review Committee's been doing is putting this bucket list of well, there's what's going to be in the JPA, and then there's this bucket list for the bylaws. And the new commission is going to need to like sort of hit the ground running with those bylaws. So my suggestion is you guys be ready to help them through that process and propose bylaws for them to discuss and look at. And I mean, get the bucket list from Ann Keck and think about, because I think they're going to be lost lands and they're going to need, no disrespect to anybody, it took us, I came on, we each came on at a time when there were 6 other commissioners who already knew what they were doing, and it takes you a few, 6 months to really kind of click into, this is how it works. 2 years, I would say. I mean, it takes a while, but they're going to have to sit down and start developing bylaws from day one because current bylaws aren't going to be sufficient. So I'm just suggesting that might be a big part of what you guys need to think about.
Are you done with that yet, with the PowerPoint?
No, there's about 40 more minutes.
Well, I want to have some discussion too, but I want to have it back.
Okay, so we'll wait. Maybe the microphones are a better idea, right? We can always go back to the slides. Anyone, just run through them real quick. And then in terms of the commissioner handoff, we'd like to see all of you be reappointed, so that's expected. But there may be some chance actually for overlap, like joint attendance at commission meetings for a time of 400 people at once, the 14 plus the 7. Perhaps the current commissioners could constitute some sort of advisory group that could be available on an ongoing basis, so they wouldn't be such lost lambs. And then maybe even you'd be willing to divulge your contact information so that they could get in touch with you, but obviously we can't require that. So any other ideas you have about how to help out the new guys, this is a great topic for tonight. So next we will be getting more feedback, of course, from the JPA Review Advisory Committee. We'll be getting hopefully more feedback from you tonight, and then we will coordinate with each other. Is that it? I think that might be it. We're done. Now you all can go back to your microphones and grill us.
Let's take a little bit of a 5-minute, 10-minute break.
How about 5 so we don't go
10. Okay, a 5-minute break. Although I'm really impressed. She'll be back. All right. Thank you. My question is, and we've already kind of talked about it during the break, but is the issue of limbo, that we are proceeding as if we are the commission, but in a few short months there may be an entirely new commission. And during that time we have a January workshop and a February workshop where we look at and begin to plan the budget. And under the new JPA we wouldn't have to have that timeline, but am I correct that we have to proceed as if we have to have that timeline?
Yeah, that's a problem. You do have to proceed as if, because there are deadlines that we just got today, a document from the county, what the budget timeline is, and there's at least one major benchmark that falls during your tenure, even if there is going to be a new commission seated. Wait a minute, I should restate that. So we need to start work on the first benchmark now, as if because it is possible, really, that somebody will veto the whole, torpedo the entire process. One city council is all it would take to vote it down, and you'd be back to the drawing board, and you guys would be carrying on. So if we hadn't been taking the steps to meet that deadline in mid-January, we'd be really behind the 8 ball to get it done. So we have to sort of be on, I don't think of it as limbo. I was just noting that I believe limbo was abolished by Vatican II.
Oh, okay.
So we would be more like 2 parallel tracks.
I was thinking more of dancing under a...
Oh, the limbo dance. It's going to be complicated because we'll have to do both things.
Okay.
We have to be preparing for the new commission to be seated and doing all the stuff to prepare a proposed set of bylaws and so on. At the same time as we're proceeding as if we were the current, the way you are now.
And can I just say, I think some of that, if after our year of really hard work, the whole thing just blows up and is for naught, some of what you're doing to prepare for the new commission can actually be quite useful to this commission in terms of, figuring out what should be in all. We should have leases with everyone and figuring out what should be in the leases. I mean, there are things that will translate because we will at some point, even if there isn't a new JPA, need to look at the bylaws.
Right.
And I would hazard a guess that there will be a new JPA. GPA too, but JPA. I would be surprised if it didn't happen. I know that there's a lot of dissent about a particular item, but I still think it would be very surprising if it didn't happen. But I don't know. The other thing that had crossed my mind is the possibility, and I just am raising this now, of a day-long workshop when we get, I just got to look for Mary Evelyn. No, okay. No. When we have a new commission, that we perhaps plan a day-long workshop of new and old commissioners, and have it be a process event, a chance to formally exchange information, but also informally talk. Well, I just got back from Hawaii, so talk story about what it's been like to be on the commission, what we feel it involves, and whatever.
Can you do, I mean, that would have to be open to the public.
Right. Oh, yeah. It would have to be open to the public, just like all our other day-long workshops are.
Would there be food?
There would be food. We could get each of the labs to donate. No. Any other people from the commission have ideas about transition?
I just want to go on record. I'm not going to give out my cell phone number.
Well, I'm just thinking, well, there'll be workshops for all that. Do we also... Forget that idea. Never mind. It wasn't even worse than that last.
You can always tell us anything, that comes to mind that's needed at any point. We're definitely
I
open.
just hope that was a very, very ambitious transition plan. And
Well, it
I
has
just
to be,
hope
yeah.
that you've got a lot of help to do that. Some of these people on the JPA commission or some of their staff or somebody, if we go through that process, would step up and help you with that, because that's, better than we do, I think. That's going to be a tremendous burden.
Well, one of the things that can happen, even if there isn't a tour for every commissioner to go to every library, perhaps the branch managers at each branch would hold a reception that the representative from their area or surrounding area could, then the commissioners could come and meet staff, and it could just be a sort of a get to know your branch and your branch staff at the very least, and that you could then hand off to each of the branch managers with the, so that's a little bit less.
Like that. Okay. Thanks.
Other input from us all? So we're going to proceed as if we are until we aren't.
Yeah, I think that's wise.
All right. Any comments from the public on the transition plan? Okay, preliminary discussion of the 2014 schedule. Why don't we, yeah, before we do that, we had postponed the discussion or the report from the JPA subcommittee until Julia got here. I would just like to begin that discussion, and I don't remember what the number was. 5.1.1. To say that I've read the documents. The next meeting is Thursday, the 14th.
They're scheduling, it's the 14th and the 18th, and it's a single meeting that they will carry over till the 18th.
And what time does the 14th start?
The 14th starts at 11 o'clock, and it's here. And the 18th
It's
starts.
here?
Yes, it's here. They couldn't get PMBR. And then the 18th is at 2 o'clock, and it's at the county center.
So I read the blue line draft of the current document, and there was one thing that was heartening to me. Helena's already brought it up, that the current language allowing the commission to institute a tax revenue issue is as is. There's no proposed change as of when I read it yesterday.
So what's going to happen on the 14th is Don Schwartz has put together a document, and I believe it should be posted online with the agenda in the next day or two, where he has summarized all of the feedback from the road shows to each of the city councils and to the Board of Supervisors. There was not a lot of feedback. I'm trying to remember if he even included us. We gave him feedback, but I didn't see our own little...
Yeah, there was nothing.
I don't think there was anything from us. We had things to say and we didn't get included. But in any event, he's summarized. So there's a topic, and then there's, which cities or the board thought this was a good idea and why, and what feedback from other entities were, et cetera. And they're planning, rather than, so we're starting with the current proposed amended JPA that got roadshowed to everyone. And then we're going to, rather than discussing language or changed language, we're going to discuss these topics and give direction to county council who's drafting. And if there is direction to make the changes, then the language will be discussed on the 18th of what comes back changed. Or if there's direction to take something out, then, the next revision will be discussed on the 18th. So there are a couple of things that I think are significant, that are topics that are going to be discussed on the 14th, and direction will be given. So those of you who want to spread the word and bring people these things. One of them is a topic that we all, I think, agreed that we don't like, which is the allowing for disparate treatment from outside funding. And it looks like that had a fairly negative reaction from most of the city councils. So I am optimistic that there will be a proposal or some direction to actually take that out, because it wasn't a very popular item. If not, then there's some suggestions for modifying it in some way. So that's going to be one discussion that I think will be useful and interesting. I'm very concerned because the current JPA gives us revenue, gives the commission revenue-raising abilities. There was a suggestion by the City Council of Santa Rosa that in order to exercise that revenue-raising authority, 2/3, not just of the commissioners, but they had to all go back to their jurisdictions, and 2/3 of the jurisdictions had to authorize the commission to do it. Now, to me, that is simply gutting the revenue-raising authority, because right now, without anything in the JPA about being able to put a measure on the ballot, we can put a measure on the ballot if you get enough signatures, just like any civilian, any citizen group is allowed to do, or we can put a measure on the ballot if we can convince the Board of Supervisors that it's a good time and that they should assist us with this, and they can do it for us. That's convincing one entity or a lot of individuals. Convincing 9 entities or 10 entities or 2/3 of 10 entities to agree at the same time that everybody thinks we should be able to do something, I would rather they just took the entire thing out and left the language that's in there now, which is nothing, because then at least we would be where we are now. I think this makes it substantially worse for us to ever be able to have an additional stream of revenue. Now, I know I wasn't here for the hours discussion, but in the report, which I thought was excellent and which I'm asking to have made available to the public at the 14th meeting, just because it's been a topic of this committee's discussion and I want everybody to see what's happening. There was the suggestion about a sales tax. There was a discussion in that report about that. Apparently with sales taxes, there are some requirements that cities approve, sales tax measures. So I wasn't sure if that was going to...
It does have to be a countywide, with each jurisdiction approving it, right, to be on the ballot. And it's a 1/8, it's a particular type of sales tax. It's library specific, and it's a 1/8 cent sales tax.
Right. But each jurisdiction would have to agree that goes on their ballot.
That's my understanding, right?
But for a parcel tax, the Board of Soups could put it on as a county-wide parcel tax without each city agreeing, is my understanding.
I believe so.
So, anyway,
if it's or the jurisdiction, on behalf of the jurisdiction, it could, the JPA, and if it's the governing.
Right.
It's a good question, and that's why Don Schwartz keeps saying he thinks that authority may exist now. That's sort of the way he phrases it. We think that authority may exist now.
Well, now my understanding right now, we can ask the Board of Supervisors to put something on the ballot for us, and they could put a countywide measure for parcel tax on. I don't know if they could do a sales tax, because somehow that's different and it requires
I'm not sure either. We need to
approval
find out from
each. But
County
right
council.
now, if we're talking parcel tax, my understanding is the Board of Soups could put a countywide parcel tax for the library on the ballot, and people could vote on it. Or we could go out and stand at Safeway and get enough people to sign a petition that it goes on the ballot, and then it can happen that way. But what the proposed JPA would do would be give the commission the authority to directly put something on the ballot without having to go through the Board of Supervisors or collect the signatures, which I think would be great. On the other hand, if they then require us to get 2/3 of all the jurisdictions' permission before we put it on there, that's a harder row than just getting the Board of Soups to do it. So,
And there was a talk at one of the council meetings where someone said, well, just to clarify that 2/3, that would change if the overall tax authority structure in California changed, right? So right now it's a 2/3 requirement for any tax, but there's a measure before the legislature right now, SCA 7, to lower library taxing threshold to 55%.
But that's different than, she's talking about the 2/3.
No, I know, but they were clarifying that it would be, that number would go down according to the number required for popular vote for approval, and that was an interesting point, and they just said, oh yeah. So someone said blithely, oh yeah, and I thought, really? So I'm not sure if they're really clear on that.
I don't think they are.
Because I think that's where the 2/3 idea comes from, that unless there's really 2/3 of the jurisdictions that would approve it as electeds of those jurisdictions, then perhaps it would be less likely that it would even pass. So why bother to put it on the ballot and spend all the money to run a campaign?
I think it was more a concern that we're not, that they somehow the elected officials view the ability to put a measure on the ballot as something that is a special and sacred authority that should not be lightly given to a group of people who are not elected.
I think they see it as a competing interest with themselves raising.
Right.
So I think it shows that they don't really support the library system.
Well, I think
on its own, that they're not thinking of it as a whole system. They're only thinking of their little part of it.
I think that they are concerned about the competing interests. I think a response to that, my response to that is appoint somebody you trust I can't think of a commissioner that wouldn't go back to their entity to talk to them about, I mean, the commission is not stupid. We're not going to put something on when we're competing with another big countywide measure, or even if we know of specific cities that this is a bad year because the 3 cities are doing this. I mean, there's going to be an entire review and assessment of what the political landscape is like, and there's going to be polling done, and there's going to be, I mean, there's a lot of things that would go into a decision by the commission, should the authority be granted, to put something on the ballot, because if you put it on and it doesn't pass, that's a lot of money you've spent, and not county money, not public money, but that's a lot of time and effort and money and resources you've expended, and you're not going to be able to do it again for quite a number of years. And so, I mean, I think people are not going to be stupid about it, especially if the cities are appointing people they trust, then they should trust them to.
And it is public money to run an election. I mean, you'll get billed, you'll get the bill from the people who run the elections to pay for your part of the ballot.
Right, but I don't think we are allowed to spend the library money on that. We would have to check with county council, but my understanding is we cannot spend public money on a tax measure.
No, we can't spend it on the campaign, but we will be billed for the measure. You'll be billed for the measure, for actually putting the measure, yes.
People sit there. and
Right.
pay them,
Yeah,
you pay
that part, we got billed for.
But we'll get
yeah.
clarification.
No, you do get that bill.
So so what I'm hearing is that and the issue of independent ability to raise funds are the 2 big points at this point.
I think those are the 2 big points. Sort of the political landscape, I think most of the entities were kind of sort of, okay, yes, this is going to happen kind of thing. My understanding is that there's been a concerted effort, Tom, in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, Healdsburg, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people went before the town council, and the town council said, thank you for coming. We get your point, we'll think about it. I know of 2 council members who will vote not to, but I don't know what the rest of them do.
So it's possible Healdsburg will tank the whole thing?
Well, and I know that Petaluma's city council majority was against the inequity.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue. That's what's keeping.
So if that comes out, do you think that Healdsburg will
I think
go along with it?
Healdsburg will. Yeah, I think. Of course, I know that both the lab and the Friends of the Library would probably change their position. They would go to the council and say, "Hey, we're okay."
The meeting is the 14th. Then, if people can make it, and they do listen when people get up and speak, and so
I know they do listen. They took out the commissioners having alternates. After I went on a rant and was completely ignored, and then they voted to have alternates, and then to a T, every member of the public during public comment got up and said what a bad idea it was, and every committee member changed their mind and they took it out. So public comment works. I encourage everyone to come and make one.
Julia, why was the various commissioner comment section taken out?
I don't know, it was taken
Never
out.
added in.
It just
He never added it in.
What Don Schwartz simply took all the feedback and sort of collated it into this table, and there doesn't appear to be any feedback from the commission, although we gave commission feedback.
Or from the staff. He's taking back jurisdiction commentary.
Right. It's
Pure-
just the
pure
people
and
who are
simple.
going to really have
Yeah,
the
but
final
the
amendment.
commission sits on that board, so it should have been included.
But the commission won't be voting on whether to approve or
The
not approve the
JPA.
JPA.
We don't get to decide that. So I mean, I understand he was
So
just
we don't-
streamlining
so-
it.
Might as well not go.
are there any other comments about this issue? I'm wanting to move things along because I get in trouble. Is there any public comment on this? All right, let's move along then back to the regular agenda, to the schedule for 2014. We have 2 issues, I gather, on that. One of them is the meeting schedule for ourselves and the holiday issues.
I have a question. Will the workshops, will having the workshop at the end of March, is that too late to get what we need to get to the county? When do we have to give that first draft budget that we've approved to the county?
I think this schedule is the act as if current commission
Right.
schedule, just
Right.
like last year.
And my memory, and maybe it's because, is that
What
we
is it?
usually have a meeting in the end of February and then another one more closer to the beginning of March, and that's so that we can do a final approval at the April meeting, because that's when something's due, or am I misremembering?
This is basically the same schedule that was followed last year.
Okay.
We did just today get budget timeline from the county on their 14-15 deadlines, but I did not bring that with me. I don't know if you have it in your brain, Bruce.
I don't have it. I don't have it with me. We have that January date where there's some things due, and what we'll have out in the next day or two is going through the communication that we got from the county, and correlating it with schedules. It's going to be, we've had a couple of, I went to a meeting this morning. We met with Donna Dunk, the assistant or deputy auditor controller. They're right now, they're not quite sure about some things with this new system conversion that they're going through. And so they've moved the calendar up a little bit. But then when you start to talk about the budget, well, we're not quite sure what we're going to use to facilitate the new financial system. And so the best we can do right now is whatever they give us, try to get that digested and get it out as fast as we can to you folks. I do think it will be moved up a little bit when we finally get those dates. And then, of course, then layer over all the issues about whether there's going to be a new commission or not, or a new JPA. And so there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
If there is a new JPA, we won't have the county's deadlines. Or it won't have the commission won't have the county's deadlines, because it would remove.
I like the use of the word we.
Oversight. But
well,
we still have deadlines.
The one thing I think to keep in thought is the library is still going to need a financial system,
right,
and still going to need a budget system, and that is the one that the county is serving up. And if you have a new JPA or you have the existing JPA, I think you're at a point right now where you're committed to go with the county's new system. You won't have enough time to go out and find somebody else and implement it before July 1.
Do we know what that new system costs us?
Not yet.
Not yet.
I think they said mid-December they would be sharing that information out with all the agencies.
Can we have a presentation will we have enough information in December to have a presentation, or was it our January meeting?
So they did give us a hint when we met with them the other day. They said, here's the amount you pay now. It'll probably be 30% more. Didn't they say that? They did say that, right? I ran the number on my calculator, and it looked like over $200,000 a year.
Yeah. They did say about 30% more, but then there's this issue whether we would stay as a dependent or an independent
Right.
in the eyes of the county. And what's at stake is about 30%, in terms of cost. And so right now we're in the higher tier, but if you have a new JPA, all of a sudden we're independent. We don't need to be part of their component financial reporting document. Okay, that's good news in terms of getting a bill from Sonoma County. The other side is now we got to produce our own financial document and our own comprehensive annual financial report and things that go along with that. There'll be increased costs with your outside auditors, your et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, like I said, there's so many things up in the air, and to be able to give you definitive numbers or times, it's just unfortunate the schedule is such that if we were standing here next week, it might be, you know, we might be talking much differently or giving much more information than today.
So can we have an update as to where this whole topic is in December? And maybe at that point, there's a little more clarity around what...
Yeah, we can also go back and compare the schedule and the timelines that the county gave us to the commission meeting schedule that's being proposed, because this isn't going to be voted on until the next meeting anyway. So that would buy us a little more time to make those comparisons, and we might propose bumping some of these meetings up.
And am I hearing correctly that we are sort of at a position where we're saying we're simply going to buy the county product even if it's not the best product for us? We don't have time to go look at anything?
Yes, it's been on Focus and Finish to investigate a new financial management system, and
for a year.
Since that time, we've lost the CFO and
No,
lost the director. So
well, when you talk about we're going to buy that, you know, we're just going to pay 1 year's annual fee, you know, whatever that is. That's much different than saying we're going to buy a license from PeopleSoft to use that software, and we're going to write a check, and if you walk away from it, you just wasted all your money. We're going to get a product for a year, and we're going to get use, and then if it just turns out to be too expensive or a bad financial deal for the library, you can start initiating, looking around, and, you know, pursue your options. So you will get something for your money.
And it's not locked in.
And you're not going to be locked in.
It's going to cost us
$200 grand more or $200 grand?
No, 30% increase, right?
Yeah, 30% increase. So it'd be about 200 versus, I forgot, what is it, around 170 or something, 150, 60 right now.
In terms of the commission meetings, I noticed that we're meeting the Monday after Labor Day is the proposed day instead of putting it on the Wednesday. For personal reasons, I love that, but I just wanted to note people that. The other question I had is, I'm noticing that November 3rd is scheduled. Is it traditional that CLA is always the first weekend in November?
We have dates for next year already, and I can't remember what they were, but it doesn't seem like November. Well, it might have been. It's a weekend this next time, not a Monday, Tuesday thing. So
Well,
it should be fine.
what I noticed is it's the Monday after 4th of July and the Monday after Thanksgiving. Do you really want to do that?
Monday after Thanksgiving, December 1st is Monday.
Yeah?
Why don't we?
In terms of getting stuff done before people leave for 4 days of vacation.
you mean in terms of the library staff preparing? Because we always have it done a week before the meeting anyway to mail it out to you. So that wouldn't pose a problem, I don't think.
Okay.
My question is, looking at this, it appears as though we are locked in forever to Central, and we're not giving any consideration whatsoever of holding road shows of these, assuming we're all still here, or somebody is still here, that we not visit any of the other branches, which we had discussed in the past. I realize all the problems, but is that just sort of off the table now?
We were planning to come to you at the next meeting with a proposal around possible options for relocating this meeting, as well as options around changes to the way we are video recording the meetings and taking minutes for the meetings.
I just think it would be a nice idea. And I asked the question before, and I did get a satisfactory answer, but I'll ask it again anyway. How many people watch these things? We're spending a lot of money and a lot of time. And, I mean, if 3 people are watching the meetings, then I have to say, is this worthwhile? I don't know if we have accurate numbers on that. I'm just asking.
But the other option was asking a staff member to spend a huge amount of time drafting our minutes each month. And so part of the streaming video was not only to satisfy those who couldn't physically be here, but it was to assist staff in reducing their workload.
Anyway, this is part of the topic for next month. You have something to look forward to. We can review this next month. And because I know that one of the issues is that something about the mics. The mic is causing nightmares to people. Not us, but other people. So it's time we're going to be looking at the whole issue. Anyway, do you have a CLA date?
November 7th through 9th.
Pardon me?
I'm trying to find it.
November 7th through 9th.
November 7th through 9th? Okay, so we're before that then. We're not going to run into that same thing next year. All right, the other comment I would make is the idea of the Saturday versus Tuesday closing. I'd like to have some staff input on that before we decide a calendar. I'd like to know what the staff feels about the idea of being open on Saturday and closed on Tuesday.
Okay.
The public could then get their Saturday back, and the staff would still have a 3-day weekend. Weird weekend, but a 3-day off. Any other calendar comments before we move on? Any comments from the public? All right. We're moving to management report. Are you Dean? I've been told she leaves at 10:15, no matter what. Anyway, we're moving on to this management report. Questions, comments from the commission? Anything? Anybody? I'll just generally say it really seems like things are moving smoothly. I know that you two have a lot on your plate, and it feels like you're eating and digesting it well. But we won't go further with that metaphor.
Sounds like the low-hanging fruit.
Right. I also noticed that the woman from Sebastopol's name isn't on here, is retired.
I'm not sure what the effective date of that is, but it might not have.
I think she has.
Well, it was on the previous report.
Oh, okay.
Ann Stroberger.
And I've met her. She's questions? Comments? I notice you have something highlighted.
Oh, I was just so happy about this says the tentative agreement was signed, but of course we know that the actual agreement was approved. Yay. Is there anything on Focus and Finish that you would direct us to be aware of, either, from a concern or otherwise?
Well, otherwise, I mean, it's just great progress on the self-checks being rolled out. Patrons are reacting very positively to them. The CERC staff here at Central has said nothing but good things about having them available. And I really want to thank Mike especially for doing such great work on that rollout. So it's just been fantastic. And the other thing is that I would like to comment briefly on the resource sharing item. We have completed and successfully tested this piece of software that was developed for us, connecting the fulfillment resource sharing software, which is open source software, to our Horizon system. However, our purported partners have not completed their connector to their system, and in fact haven't even done any work on it at all, and have no intention, it seems, of doing any work on it. So we have no one to play with this. So while it's a good thing that this piece of software was created, and was created with grant money, so not at a cost to the library, aside from a fairly considerable amount of staff time devoted to it, right now it's just sitting there waiting for someone else to want to develop a connector to fulfillment. So there may be some other things on the horizon for resource sharing that I hope to be able to bring forward sometime within the next couple of months. But as of right now, we're pretty much doing things just through OCLC. That's all I had to note. Is it on here that we engaged Cherry Hill as our, from the digital branch front, I can report that we have selected a firm to do our design work for the website revamp and moving over to a new digital branch model, and that is Cherry Hill. That's their name. It was them or Squishy. So I think we picked the one with the better name. Sorry, Squishy, if you're watching, but that we're really looking forward to having something before too long that you all can see and staff can begin to evaluate.
Reminds me of the name of the phone company.
Yeah.
3.2.1 is prepare a second annual report for library year 2012-2013. It has the director as the lead, but it has it assigned to a commission subcommittee.
It's Paul
Okay.
and we have not gotten together. We've been very busy. So we'll try to get together soon.
There is another subcommittee.
There is yet another
subcommittee. I just was going to ask if I was on it.
Oh, and you, I think, are on that.
Wait. Oh, I can't be going there.
Anything else on the monthly activities or the monthly status report? If not, let's move on to the financial report. Anything significant here that we need to be aware of, Bruce? Nope.
Probably in terms of the library's finances, you don't get any, as all of you are aware, your property tax comes in twice a year. So it just doesn't have a lot to report on in terms of how you're doing. I mean, I took a quick look at the expenditures and basically the salaries and benefits, and we're looking okay there. And now it's just waiting to see how the tax comes in, and the auditor controller is saying that it should be pretty good. I mean, we've passed that declining thing, and it's coming up.
Great.
It's increasing.
Does anybody know how the Roner Park Friends were able to donate $34,000.
Lucky on the slots, maybe.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Have we thought about opening a branch at the casino?
They have a concession on the parking lot, haven't they?
That's a significant.
I do know their book sales have been really good this year.
Roanoke Park has the permanent bookstore.
So does Petaluma.
Oh. Perhaps there's just more readers in.
I don't know.
No, seriously, they've always reported really good book sales. So
Anyway,
priority.
thank you. Thanks to the donors. All right, I think we're now finally to item number 12. Oh, first of all, any public input on the report, annual, monthly reports, management reports? Okay, moving on to item 12, Library Advisory Board appointment.
I move by resolution that the Sonoma County Library Commission appoint Lillian Borgeson to a new position on the Sebastopol Library Advisory Board for a term ending on June 30th, 2017.
1 second.
I'll second.
Second by Susan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that person is appointed. We are now ready to go into closed session. It'll be a closed session to meet and confer with the labor negotiators. Is there any public comment before moving into closed session? There being none, we will come out of closed session upstairs in the conference room. If any public wishes to wait around to hear if there's anything that we want to report out afterwards, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we are done in here. Thank you for coming.